Hey guys, tonight we journey somewhere damp, noisy, and absolutely crawling with peasants. No, not your high school cafeteria. We're slipping back nearly 1,000 years into the thick, stony guts of a medieval castle. Not to marvel at the throne or sip wine with the king. Nope, you're not nearly important enough for that. You're just one of the hundred-something nobodies who keep the whole medieval machine wheezing forward, hauling slop, dodging crossbow bolts, and pretending to enjoy barley mush. Imagine this. It's sunrise, and you're shuffling up a muddy hill. Your boots, if we're being generous calling them that, are already soaked. Before you looms a massive hulk of gray stone, surrounded by spiked wooden palisades and a suspicious number of large birds circling overhead. Crows, always a promising omen. You duck under the shadow of the portcullis. Try not to stare too long at the severed heads spiked above the gate, and step into the world of castle life. You're 17, maybe 18. You left your village after your older brother accidentally claimed your share of the turnip harvest. You've heard there's work here, scraps of bread and a roof, if you're lucky. But as your feet echo into the gatehouse, and the guards glare at you like you just insulted their mother and their goat, you start to suspect you may have misunderstood what opportunity meant. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where my night owls are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first few moments in the castle are overwhelming. There's shouting in 3 different dialects, clanging from the blacksmith's corner, and a small child who sprints past you giggling, completely naked, except for one sock and what appears to be half a pigeon. Welcome home. You're ushered, more like shoved, by a wiry man with no eyebrows into a line of new arrivals. He smells like vinegar and regret. You stand beside a woman cradling a bucket of leeks, a boy picking at a scab the size of a coin, and someone snoring while standing up. Eventually, you're assigned. No real training, just a quick nod toward a steep spiral staircase and a muttered, "Try not to die." Your first station, the outer ward. This is where the servants live, breathe, cook, and very occasionally riot. You're told to help in the storerooms, which means crawling into cramped cellars to count sacks of barley, and watching weevils squirm through the flour. It's also where you're introduced to the universal rule of castle life: rank matters. And your rank is, let's say, subterranean. No one really explains the rules. You just figure them out by doing something wrong and getting whacked with a spoon. You can't step into the main hall unless summoned. Don't look the noblemen in the eye, unless they're drunk, in which case, definitely don't look away. Never touch a knight's helmet, and absolutely never interrupt the cook when she's cursing. Sensory overload becomes your normal. Stone underfoot, damp straw in your tunic, smells you try not to identify. One day, you swear you hear Latin chants, screaming geese, and a lute solo all at once. Historians still argue whether castles were more chaotic or just acoustically cursed. As the hours stretch on, you start to notice little details. The worn groove on the stair from thousands of feet. The strange red handprint high on the kitchen doorframe. The old cat that seems to appear in 2 places at once. You're not entirely sure whether the castle is haunted or just really lived in. You meet other servants, some friendly, some feral. There's Tib, who's missing 3 fingers but can juggle apples with the rest. There's Greta, who claims she's half noble and 1/8 witch. And, of course, toothless Gwen, who insists she once kissed a bishop and survived the plague 3 times. You don't believe her, but you do avoid sharing a cup with her just in case. Meals are edible most of the time. Pottage is the staple, a gloppy mix of grains, root vegetables, and occasionally something that once had feathers. Bread is dense enough to be used as weaponry, and wine is just vinegar with ambitions. But you eat it all because the alternative is hunger, and hunger in a castle makes you noticeable. And being noticed, not always a good thing. At night, you sleep in the servants' hall, if you're lucky. It's loud, it stinks, and someone always snores loud enough to scare the chickens. You wrap yourself in a coarse blanket, lay your head on a sack of old peas, and try not to dream about falling off battlements. One evening, after hauling firewood for hours, you collapse beside the hearth and realize something unsettling. You're getting used to this. Your hands are calloused, your back aches, and the first job they stick you with is the gatehouse. Congratulations. The guards eye you like you're the chicken that wandered into the pig pen, but they're too tired or too hung over to argue. One of them tosses you a pike that's taller than you, blunted at the end, and splintered like someone tried using it to stir stew. Just stand here, he grunts, and look like you'd stab someone. Maybe. It's not quite the heroic start you imagined when you left your village, dreaming of adventure and roasted meat. But here you are, standing in the biting wind, trying to look intimidating while your teeth chatter so hard they could pass for castanets. The gatehouse is more than a fancy archway. It's a fortress within the fortress, guard rooms, murder holes, heavy portcullises you can crank up or drop to trap enemies like oversized mice. Unfortunately, none of that is your job. You're stationed outside, beside a crate of suspiciously wet firewood and a chamber pot someone's forgotten to take inside. The guards inside the gatehouse have names like Big Rob and Twice-Bitten Allen. Most of them sleep more than they watch. You, though, you're on your feet from sunup to sundown, unless you collapse from the sheer thrill of being ignored for 12 straight hours. You meet toothless Gwen on your second day. She's not actually toothless. She's got one left, sort of diagonal. She hobbles by every morning with a pot of something that smells like overcooked onions and betrayal. She says it's stew. You try to say no thanks, but she's already ladled a glob into a wooden bowl and handed it over with a grin that makes you question the structural integrity of your stomach lining. Spoiler. You eat it. You regret it. But only briefly, because your body decides to reject it before it fully registers. The gatehouse is also where you first understand just how deeply divided castle life is. Nobles sweep through on horseback, cloaks fluttering, not even glancing your way. Merchants argue with scribes over tolls, trying to convince them a cart of turnips doesn't contain anything taxable. Historians still argue whether contraband in vegetable carts was common or just really well documented. And then there are the travelers, pilgrims in patched cloaks, messengers covered in road dust, even the occasional bard hoping to sneak in for a meal and maybe a warm corner. You're supposed to check them, make sure they're not criminals, diseased, or French. But mostly, You just nod and pretend you're not freezing to death. Let's talk clothes. You're wearing what's generously called a tunic, though it feels more like a burlap sack that lost a bar fight. Your hose, basically medieval leggings, are itchy, saggy, and full of mysterious holes. You tried tying them up with string like the older guards do, but one snapped and hit you in the eye, so now you just tuck the ends into your boots and hope for the best. Oh, the boots. They're less shoes and more leather encouragement. They've been passed down through 5 people, 2 of whom had very different foot shapes, one of whom had 6 toes. You don't ask. There's no break room, no bathroom either. There's just a corner of the wall where everyone goes, and the vague hope that the wind is blowing the right way. And yes, someone peed in the firewood crate. You try not to think about that too much. You start learning the rhythms of castle life from this post. The blacksmith's bellows hiss just after dawn. The kitchens belch smoke by mid-morning. Horses clatter in and out by the hour. The stonemasons shout at each other constantly. Apparently, that's just how they talk. The castle dogs bark at everything except the one suspicious figure who slips through after dark. More on him later. Here's a fun one. A group of kids from the village sneak past you one day. They're daring each other to touch the castle wall and run. One of them sticks a frog down the back of your tunic. The guards laugh until they cry. You consider stabbing someone just to feel alive, but not everything's miserable. Sometimes there's a warm breeze from the kitchens. Sometimes the reeve brings out a meat pie and hands you half. And once you hear music coming from the upper halls, harps, laughter, something like joy, and it echoes all the way down to your lonely stone post. On your 4th night, something strange happens. A man rides up to the gate, cloaked in fine wool, eyes hidden under the deep hood. He speaks softly, but with authority, and hands you a wax-sealed scroll you're absolutely not supposed to read. So, of course, as soon as he's inside and the gate creaks shut, you sneak a peek. It's written in Latin, and you can't read Latin, but you do recognize one symbol, a black serpent coiled around a chalice. One of the guards sees it, turns pale, and mutters, "Not again!" You ask what that means. He won't tell you. Just stares at the gate and mutters something about last time and boiling oil. The thing about castle life, there's always a story no one wants to tell. By the end of the week, you're not the same kid who walked in. Your back's straighter, your hands are blistered, and you no longer flinch at the sight of rats. You do, however, flinch when Gwen offers second helpings. And just when you think you're getting the hang of it, someone tells you you've been reassigned. Apparently, you made too much eye contact with the steward's falcon. Next up, the Great Keep. Hope you weren't enjoying your time outdoors. You climb the stairs to the keep with feet like bricks and a stomach that's still trying to recover from yesterday's questionable barley stew. As you enter, a blast of colder air greets you, somehow. Inside, the castle is even draftier than the outer walls. The keep is supposed to be the heart of the stronghold. Stone walls 6 feet thick, a maze of twisting corridors, and ceilings so high they seem to breathe. Welcome to your new daily nightmare. You trudge down corridors that echo like cathedrals and smell faintly of soot, mold, and wet wool. Your footsteps bounce off every surface, so stealth? Impossible. Everything you do is public. Your clumsy tray carrying, your whispered muttering when you trip over your own feet, And yes, everyone definitely heard you belch in front of that visiting bishop. The walls are bare in some places, drafty and gray, but in others you pass vivid tapestries, scenes of hunts, saints, and one very chaotic boar fight hang over you, colored with dyes so rich you wonder how many beetles died for that red. They're beautiful. Also, they're hiding so many rats. You catch movement behind one and pretend you didn't. Here's the thing about the keep. It's noisy. Constantly. Between boots clacking, dogs barking, servants gossiping, and wind howling through unglazed windows, it's like living in a giant, slightly haunted bell tower. Historians still argue whether castle interiors were designed with acoustics in mind, or if everyone just accepted they'd be shouting their entire lives. You're given a new task, runner, which sounds exciting until you realize it means one thing. You run. Upstairs, downstairs, through kitchens, into courtyards, and across halls the size of small villages. You deliver messages, fairy linens, and once, just once, you're told to fetch the goose. No one clarifies which goose. You bring 3. No one thanks you. Every hallway has its own ecosystem. There's the scribe wing, which always smells of ink and anxiety. The knight's corridor reeks of old leather and sweaty bravado. The servants' stairs are their own dimension, narrow, spiraling, and so steep they might qualify as medieval cardio machines. You slip at least once a day. You learn to hold trays very low. You're told to stay away from the noble quarters unless summoned, which is both a relief and a mystery. You pass doors carved with family crests, guarded by silent men with polished halberds and the emotional range of wet bricks. Rumors swirl, secret love affairs, poisoned goblets, ghosts of jilted duchesses. You try not to listen, but you also absolutely listen. Let's talk about the noises again, because they never stop. There's the constant thud of laundry being beaten in some far-off room, a rhythmic clanging from the armory that might be sword practice or someone just angrily hammering a helmet, and the music, harps, lutes, flutes, all drifting down from the solar, played by people you're not important enough to look at. You pass a chamber where servants are scrubbing a floor with brushes made of bundled twigs. The floor is stone. It's always stone. But still, they scrub. One girl hisses, "Don't stop moving, or the steward sees." And you instantly understand why no one ever loiters in the keep. And then there's the gossip. Oh, the gossip. A tangled knot of who insulted whom, which guard is sweet on which scullery maid, and the most recent noble to fall off his horse after 3 cups of honeyed wine. Greta, the laundry maid, whispers that the Lord's youngest son is hiding a forbidden love letter inside the chapel's lectern. You don't even know what a lectern is, but now you have to find it. Once, while delivering wine, you stumble into the great hall during a minor feast. Torches blaze on every wall, and the air is thick with roast meat, garlic, and perfume so strong it could stun a bear. You're invisible to the guests, just another part of the castle's furniture. But you get to witness the blur of silk gowns, the clink of goblets, and a knight nearly choke on a hazelnut. You pretend you didn't laugh. You absolutely did. One fringe little fact. Some castles kept pet monkeys. Not always, not often. But occasionally a noble would bring back a curious creature from a distant land, and it would terrorize the halls until someone accidentally left a window open. No monkey here, yet. But the dog with one eye and a crooked leg gives you the same kind of chaotic energy. Your sleeping spot's upgraded slightly. You now sleep under a staircase, between a cracked barrel and a sack of potatoes that is slowly turning into soup. A rat joins you most nights. You name him Crispin. He seems offended by your presence. You learn to time your footsteps to the patrols. Learn which cooks will sneak you scraps and which will smack your knuckles with a ladle. You discover a tiny window behind the staircase that, if you lean just right, shows the sunrise over the far wall. It smells like damp plaster and regret, but it's yours. One evening, you pass a knight in the hallway who's lost in thought, staring at a cracked stone near the baseboard. He murmurs, "Still haven't found the passage," and walks on. You blink. Was that important? Probably not. It definitely was. Here's something not in the scrolls. The castle has moods. Some days it's bright, bustling, oddly cheerful. Other days the walls feel too close. The torches flicker the wrong way. Whispers echo from nowhere. You learn quickly to follow the older servants' cues. If they're walking faster, you run. At the end of a long day, as you collapse on your pile of old cloaks and hope they're moth-free, you start to understand the weird paradox of castle life. It's both impossibly structured and completely chaotic. You're just a thread in this medieval sweater, and it's unraveling in slow motion. And yet somehow you're surviving, barely. You wake up with a potato imprint on your cheek and a rat nibbling on your tunic string. Crispin, again. He's territorial now. Today, they send you to the kitchens. You think this might be an improvement. Warmth, food, maybe even a crumb or two that falls in your direction. It is not an improvement. The castle kitchen is not the cozy hearth of storybooks. It's a war zone made of fire, knives, and sweat. It's also where you learn that medieval cooking is a kind of terrifying magic. The kitchen is enormous. Long wooden tables, smoke-stained ceilings, and hearths so large you could roast a boar inside them. In fact, they are roasting a boar. Its open mouth grins at you like it knows you're next. Everything smells of onions, animal fat, and vague panic. You're handed a knife and told to cut turnips till you see God. You laugh. No one else does. The head cook is called Mistress Ellen, and she doesn't walk so much as stomp. Her sleeves are permanently stained with something unidentifiable. She shouts commands like a general, and when she points, people move or disappear. She doesn't learn your name. She calls you that one, followed by your task, that one who keeps dropping things, or that one with the hair. Your job is basic. Peel, chop, carry, avoid eye contact. Every time you mess up, a baker named Odo tells you, "Back in my day, they'd hang you for slicing carrots like that." You can't tell if he's joking. His smile is unsettling. The ovens are monstrous, stone-bellied beasts that radiate heat in waves. You're not allowed near them yet. Too many incidents with apprentices setting their tunics on fire. That happened just last week. One boy is still missing his eyebrows. You're allowed to stir the soup cauldron, though. It's the size of a bathtub and smells suspiciously like laundry water. You stir clockwise, then counterclockwise. Then you drop the spoon in and have to fish it out with a ladle. A scullion laughs so hard she snorts cabbage. You're really making friends here. Between stirring and slicing, you run food to different parts of the castle. There's the buttery, the pantry, and something called the larder, which you assumed was a place for lards. It's actually where meat is hung to dry. You go in once and emerge with an entirely new fear of sausages. Quirky tidbit for you. Rich folks like their food with weird, bright colors. Dishes dyed blue, green, even gold, because what says I'm important more than eating a pie that looks like it was made by a unicorn? Historians still argue whether these colored dishes were actually tasty or just edible status symbols. Speaking of weird food, today you'll help make a cockentress. It's half pig, half chicken, sewn together, roasted, and presented like a Frankenstein dinner guest. You help thread the stitching. You cry a little. The noble guests love it. Sometimes you're sent outside to the kitchen gardens, where herbs grow in sad little rows and chickens peck at everything like tiny judgmental dragons. You're told to gather leeks. You bring back garlic. You're not praised for your creativity. You find out the kitchen is also the gossip hub. While people chop, they talk loudly. You hear that the steward was seen sneaking into the armory after curfew, that the lady of the house has a mirror from the east that shows people secrets, that one night sleeps with his eyes open and mumbles poetry. You're not sure what's true, but it's better than stew talk. Now for a historical gem, the idea of a fork, almost non-existent here. People eat with knives and fingers, sometimes with a spoon if you're lucky. You serve a nobleman his pottage, and he just dips his entire hand in. Apparently, that's normal. You gag, very quietly. Dinner service is the worst. Everything is a blur. Platters of roasted goose, trenchers of bread, basically edible plates. Pitchers of mead, everything balanced precariously on trays made for people with 6 arms. You sprint between the kitchen and the hall so often your legs forget how to stop. At one point, you collide with a stable boy carrying eels. Leave eels. You apologize profusely while they slither away into the flagstones. By evening, your tunic is soaked with grease, wine, and some kind of sauce that no one will identify. You smell like a stew that went wrong halfway through. You've also cut yourself 3 times and possibly burned off your nose hairs. You sit for a moment on a flour sack back against the wall and let your head droop. The kitchen hums around you, spit still turning, bread still baking, the fire popping like it's laughing at you. Mistress Ellen strides past and says, "You'll do?" Maybe. It's the nicest thing anyone said all week. Just as you think your day is over, the bell rings. Not the meal bell, the alarm bell. Everything freezes. Then chaos explodes. Someone yells, "Raiders!" though no one knows if it's true. Knives are dropped. Pots are flung. Someone grabs a rolling pin like it's a broadsword. You're shoved toward the wall and told to stay down. You crouch, heart hammering, watching as people dash in every direction. One boy hides inside a sack of flour. You silently wish you thought of that first. The alarm stops just as suddenly. False alarm. Someone says it was just a merchant who came too close to the outer wall. Others mutter about shadowy figures near the well. You try not to think about how fast the keep turned from warm to wild. Later that night, you lie awake under the stairs again, your hands sore, your mind racing. The castle is quiet now, too quiet. You hear a dog bark once, then nothing. You realize something important. Nothing in the castle stays calm for long. And tomorrow, they're sending you to the stables. You should have known better than to be excited about the stables. At first light, someone kicks your foot and grunts, "Up." Your stable help now. Your body protests, every muscle stiff from kitchen duty, but curiosity drags you to your feet. Maybe horses are better company than angry cooks and soup cauldrons the size of small lakes. Wrong again. The stables are a brutal mixture of smells. Manure, wet hay, sweaty leather, and whatever died in the corner last week. Your nostrils are personally offended. The moment you step inside, a goat sneezes on your boots. A stable hand named Hob, who may or may not be part ferret, tosses you a broom and says, "Start shoveling." You shovel more. You shovel until your arms beg for mercy and your soul considers a career change into rock gardening. The stable has horses of every kind, tall war horses with names like Thunder and Mauler, palfreys for the noble ladies, dainty hooves, diva attitudes, and one donkey who stares at you like he's reading your diary. There's also a swan. No one knows why. It's terrifying. A knight stomps in mid-morning, clanging in full armor, demanding that his destrier be ready for drills. You don't know what a destrier is until he points to the absolute tank of a horse, snorting steam like an angry kettle. You approach with an apple and shaking hands. The horse eats the apple, then your glove. Progress? Here's a historical tidbit. War horses weren't just transportation, they were trained weapons, used to trample enemies, knock down foot soldiers, and kick anything that looked vaguely threatening, or in your case, vaguely incompetent. One stable hand has 3 teeth and a story about the time I got kicked so hard I saw St. Peter tap dancing. Your job quickly expands beyond shoveling. You learn to curry-comb their coats, clean hooves, which is terrifying when the hoof is the size of your head, and refill water troughs that seem to empty magically every 10 minutes. You also learn that horses are dramatic. They bite when jealous. They neigh when bored. One tries to flirt with a chicken. The chicken is unimpressed. Some of the noble pages arrive in the afternoon to practice riding. They treat you like furniture. You hold reins, fetch saddles, and catch a runaway pony named Button, who makes a break for the vegetable cart. Button is the hero you didn't know you needed. Inside the tack room, a dim, damp corner filled with oiled leather and frustration, you discover the real treasure: saddle soap. Why? Because it smells slightly better than the rest of this dung-scented disaster zone. You sniff it like a secret luxury. No shame. Fringe fact of the day: some medieval horses were taught to bow, as in dip their heads theatrically for their rider. A knight from the next castle over supposedly had a horse that bowed before battle and refused to trample clergy. Historians still argue whether this was chivalry or just a very confused animal. Mid-shift, you're sent to the hayloft, where you learn a valuable truth. Climbing a wooden ladder with a pitchfork is a bad idea. The loft is dusty, dark, and probably full of spiders the size of apples. You toss down hay bales like your life depends on it, because if you don't, the horses scream. Yes, scream. No one warned you about that. You start to enjoy the rhythm of it, though. The clatter of hooves, the snorts, the sound of brushing thick winter coats. It's a kind of music, messy but honest. And unlike the nobles, the horses don't lie. When they like you, they nuzzle. When they don't, they bite. Simpler rules. One day, while cleaning tack, you overhear a stable boy muttering about the secret door near the grain bins. You perk up. He catches you and glares. Forget you heard that. Naturally, you don't. You make a mental note to explore when no one's watching. And about the grain, it's kept locked up, more guarded than the wine. Rodents are the enemy. The barn cat, Lady Clauselot, name unofficial but widely accepted, patrols the rafters with the grace of a ninja and the judgment of a school teacher. She tolerates you, barely. Lunch in the stables is quick. bread, onion, maybe a bit of dried meat if you're lucky. You eat sitting on a hay bale, surrounded by flies, as a horse tries to chew your sleeve. You give up and let it, whatever keeps the peace. You're asked to help with hoof trimming. The farrier is a quiet man named Toth, who wears more soot than the clothing. He shows you how to hold the hoof steady, and you learn very quickly what not to do. Hint, drop the hoof, and it lands on your foot every time. Sometimes nobles come by to admire their steeds. You're told not to speak unless spoken to. One lady compliments your braiding on her horse's mane. You feel a brief flash of pride before realizing she's drunk and probably talking to the horse. Evenings in the stable are quiet, aside from the occasional restless snort or scrape of hoof on stone. The air cools, and the scent of hay gets sweeter. Less sweat, more serenity. You finally start to feel almost at peace. That's when the owl arrives. It swoops in like a ghost, lands on the rafters, and stares straight into your soul. Everyone stops. Someone mutters, "Omen!" You mutter, "Nope," and go back to brushing Mauler. The owl stays for an hour. No one talks above a whisper. Later, as you curl up in a pile of old saddle blankets, an upgrade from the potato sack, you stare at the high stable ceiling and think, this castle is alive, not just with people, but with rhythms, superstitions, animals, stories. Even the wind seems to listen. You wonder if anyone ever really knows the whole place, every corridor, every whisper, every secret door. Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, you're starting to belong. By now, your boots are crusted with a permanent layer of mystery muck. Your hands smell like horse and onion simultaneously, and your back makes a suspicious clicking sound every time you bend over. So naturally, today's assignment is the garderobes. Oh yes, you're on toilet duty. Hey guys, tonight we clean medieval bathrooms. You've truly made it. But before you throw yourself dramatically into the moat, know this. In a castle, the garderobe is more than just a toilet. It's a weird, smelly, surprisingly complex piece of medieval engineering, and today you're going to learn just how terrifying indoor plumbing used to be. First, the basics. The garderobe is usually a stone bench with a keyhole-shaped hole carved in the middle, perched above a chute that opens directly to the outer wall, or if you're really lucky, down into a pit. Yes, that means everything just falls. Gravity handles the rest. You, brave soul, are gravity's assistant today. You start your shift climbing a narrow staircase, bucket in hand, to the highest garderobe tower in the keep. There are multiple levels of these latrines built like little overhangs on the castle wall. Windy? Yes. Private? Absolutely not. One wrong move and someone 3 floors below is getting a very unpleasant surprise. A chunky historical fact for you. In larger castles, garderobes were sometimes strategically placed over the moat, because nothing says defensive architecture like weaponized human waste. Historians still argue whether this was intentional design or just medieval laziness. You're told to inspect the chute. You pretend you didn't hear that, but the knight supervising you narrows his eyes. So you lean forward, peer into the darkness, and immediately regret every decision that led you here. The smell alone could peel the paint off a fresco. Your first job is to carry down the buckets from last night. They're heavy. They slosh. One spills. You die a little inside. You consider changing your name, faking your death, and starting a new life as a mildly competent juggler. Next, You scrub the bench with a stiff brush and something called lye soap, which is apparently strong enough to remove shame. As you work, a guard saunters by and says, "That one time someone dropped a ring down there. We had to send a boy in with a rope." You look at him. He looks at you. You both understand that you are the boy now. In an odd twist, the garderobe is also where nobles store their furs and cloaks. Why? Because they believe the strong ammonia smell keeps moths away, and possibly people, dignity, and common sense too. You're told not to touch the fur. You definitely touch the fur. Your next assignment is to help clean out the waste pit. You ask how. The stable boy who graduated from this job hands you a long stick and says, "Just keep stirring." He doesn't elaborate. You hate him deeply. Still, you do as you're told. And as you stir, you begin to marvel. Well, gag, but also marvel at how this pit has somehow turned into a swampy science experiment. Steam rises, bubbles pop. A frog hops out and stares at you like it just saw something it can never unsee. Fringe tidbit of the day. Medieval people didn't use toilet paper. They used moss, straw, rags, sometimes even smooth stones. One nobleman supposedly had cloths embroidered just for wiping. You hope to never meet him. Halfway through the day, a page rushes in and slips on the wet stone floor, nearly tumbling into the pit. You save him by grabbing his hood. He vomits on your shoes in gratitude. No one thanks you. It's just another Tuesday now. While scrubbing another bench, why are there so many? You overhear gossip echoing down from the battlements. Apparently, the young lord was seen sneaking into the servants' wing late last night. There's speculation he's hiding something, or someone. You smile. The garderobe has great acoustics for eavesdropping. Somewhere along the way, you find a coin lodged in the chute stone. You're thrilled until you realize it's been marinating down here for possibly a decade. Still, you pocket it. You name it Sir Stinks-a-Lot. It's your only treasure. The hardest part of the day isn't the smell or the buckets or the existential dread. It's the cold. The stone is freezing. The wind whips through the garderobe tower like it's trying to evict your soul. You wrap your cloak tighter and press on because what else is there to do? By sunset, your face is crusted with dust. Your hair smells like medieval mistakes. And you've developed a twitch every time someone says, "Shoot." But you also learn something weird. No one talks to you here, yet everyone sees you. Nobles avoid your eyes. Servants nod quietly. The guards smirk in sympathy. It's like you've entered a secret society, the underworld of the castle. And here's the kicker. You get paid for this job, more than you did for peeling turnips. Turns out most people would rather duel a boar than clean up after one. As the night falls and you trudge back to your nook under the stairs, you actually feel proud. Disgusted, yes, but proud. You did it. You survived the literal underbelly of castle life. You lie down, Sir Stinks-a-Lot clutched in your fist, and whisper to the rafters, "May I never, ever return to the garderobes." Spoiler. You probably will. The sound wakes you, not the usual clatter of hooves or creak of carts. This is sharper, blades being drawn, armor clinking, boots rushing over stone. You blink, still wrapped in your itchy blanket cocoon, and a boy sprints past shouting, "Militia's forming!" Militia? That's not in your job description. But you're up, curiosity dragging you toward the noise like a very determined goat. You pass through the lower corridors, catching glimpses of men tightening belts over rough wool tunics, grabbing spears, slipping on iron caps dented with history. They aren't knights. These are bakers, butchers, blacksmiths, anyone with arms strong enough to carry a weapon and enough guts to use it. Today, you learn what defense looks like when it isn't glorious. Because everyone pictures knights in shining armor charging down battlements. No one talks about the tailor standing guard with a pitchfork and shaking knees. The militia is the castle's nervous system, twitching to life when threats appear, but too underfed to ever flex hard. Their job? Protect the outer walls, man the gatehouse, and fill the space between real soldiers and total chaos. You, dear listener, are now an honorary observer, with zero say in the matter. A grizzled guard named Wern elbows you toward the bailey and says, "You've got hands. You can carry arrows." And so you do. Boxes of them, rough-fletched and bundled, ready to feed the men up on the wall walk. The soldiers are checking the bows, laughing too loud, hiding nerves. You see one boy about your age struggling to tighten his bracer, you help him. Neither of you speaks. Here's your solid historical tidbit. Most castles kept a small permanent garrison. But in times of threat, raids, local skirmishes, or outright siege, the militia stepped in. Training varied wildly. Some villages drilled monthly. Others? Well, let's just say panic and pray was their battle plan. You pass the forge, where the smiths are hammering out extra arrowheads with alarming speed. Sparks fly. A bellows wheezes like an asthmatic dragon. One apprentice is filing a blade while eating a meat pie. Efficiency, medieval style. You're sent to the gatehouse next, hauling a leather water bladder for the guards stationed there. The gatehouse is a fortress within a fortress, stone murder holes overhead, iron-reinforced doors, and enough trap mechanisms to make a thief cry. You can almost hear the castle whispering, "Come at me, bro." The guard captain lets you stay a minute. You peek through the arrow slit and see nothing, just fields, trees, and the slow crawl of a merchant's cart in the distance. False alarm, maybe? "Could be nothing," says the captain, chewing the reed. "Could be scouts. Could be worse." He shrugs. "You learn not to blink too hard." Just then someone calls out from above. You crane your neck. A tower scout reports movement near the old forest line. "Too many for traitors," he says. That gets everyone's attention. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some militias use signal birds, trained pigeons with tiny scrolls tied to their legs. Yours just has a boy with a loud voice and excellent lungs. He sprints messages from one end of the yard to the other, earning his bread and probably early shin splints. Tension rises. The smiths go quiet. The laughing stops. A priest begins praying in Latin. No one joins him, but no one interrupts either. Even the animals seem to hush. You're told to help pour oil into cauldrons near the battlements. This is not for cooking. This is for dropping. Or so you think. Turns out, boiling water or sand was more common. Cheaper, faster, still effective. Hot oil was expensive and usually saved for nobles' hair care routines. The guard next to you grins. They always think it's oil. Good, let 'em believe it. You see the militia lined along the wall. Every 10th man wears a helmet. Every 5th has boots. One has clearly repurposed a cooking pot as a helmet. You salute him internally. Fashion forward under duress. Historians still argue whether militias were genuinely effective or just symbolic deterrents. Some say their presence gave towns the confidence to resist. Others say They just made for larger body counts. You try not to think about either theory too much. You carry sandbags, set up crates, and accidentally step in a slop bucket someone forgot to move. Classic. But with every task, you become part of this strange rhythm. Castle bracing itself, inhabitants shifting roles like gears in a great grim clock. An older man named Osric teaches you how to load a crossbow. He doesn't let you fire it. Not till you got arms bigger than noodles, he says kindly. You nod, embarrassed, cradling your noodle arms in silence. By late afternoon, the threat vanishes. Scouts return. Just a band of traveling mercenaries passing through, bristly, loud, but uninterested in trouble. The guards exhale. The militia disperses. No battle today. You should be relieved, and you are. But you also see the exhaustion in the faces of the men who stood on the wall, fingers frozen to their spear shafts, imagining every nightmare marching toward them. Defense is harder than it looks. You help store the arrows, clean up the spilled sand, and pour unused water back into barrels. Osric pats your shoulder. Not bad. You didn't scream once. High praise, apparently. That night, back under your stairs, you think about how the castle shifts under pressure, how the cooks become stretcher-bearers, how the old men carry pikes again, how even the stink of the garderobe fades when danger sniffs at the gate. There's no glory in it. No epic poem will mention the terrified boy holding a crossbow he's not allowed to fire. But you were there. You saw how real defense is built, not from stone, but from people who refuse to run. You drift off, ears still ringing with phantom boots on cobblestones, hands twitching from the weight of too many arrows, dreaming of a day when the alarm bell never rings. Spoiler, it will, and soon. The air smells like flour today, not the soft, powdered kind you buy in tidy paper bags, but the gritty, clumpy stuff that clings to skin and nostrils and lives permanently under fingernails. You're in the castle bakehouse now, where the heat never sleeps and the bread, if you're lucky, doesn't bite back. You start the day elbow deep in dough, and by the end you'll understand just how vital and frankly exhausting the life of a medieval baker truly is. The bakehouse itself is its own little universe, usually tucked near the outer bailey to keep the risk of fire away from more valuable stone buildings, which is great, unless you're the one standing next to the inferno every day. Welcome to your new internship. The oven is massive, vaulted stone like a miniature dragon's cave, warm enough to roast you before you even open it. It's fed with bundles of dried wood and sometimes, in desperation, old furniture or dung bricks. You're handed a wooden peel, a kind of giant spatula, and are shown how to slide dough into the oven without losing your eyebrows. Today's historical fact: in many castles, bread wasn't just a food, it was currency. Workers were often paid partially in loaves. Nobles used it to measure hospitality. Even prison diets guaranteed at least some bread, though it was usually harder than a bishop's conscience. You knead until your arms ache, the rhythm hypnotic. Fold, press, turn, repeat. The flour dust turns your skin ghost white. Your nose itches. You sneeze. A dust cloud explodes off your sleeve. Everyone laughs. Welcome to the flour gang. Next to you, the master baker inspects each lump of dough with the solemnity of a judge. Too dry, tossed, too wet, reworked, too lumpy. Might as well be feeding the pigs. No pressure. As you load loaves into the oven, you're told the timing is done by instinct, not clocks. There's no timer, no beeping, Just the smell, the feel of the oven's breath on your face, and the color of the crust. You wonder how many centuries of burnt bread it took to master that. Mid-morning, you're given a new task. Trenchers. These are not just any loaves. They're sturdy, plate-shaped rounds used instead of dishes by nobles. After the meal, these bread plates are sometimes given to the poor. Sometimes. Other times, they're thrown to the dogs or back to the kitchen to be dried into crouton-like cubes. Recycling, medieval edition. Here's a strange tidbit for your collection. Some castles reportedly added crushed bone or a chalk to their flour to make it stretch further. Not exactly FDA approved, historians still argue whether this was common practice or just extreme famine behavior. You try not to imagine whose bones those might have been. You're also told to help with something called sour leaven. Basically, it's a fermented starter that gives the bread its rise and tang. You open the jar and instantly regret it. It smells like a foot lost in time. The baker nods approvingly. "It's alive," he says, like a proud wizard. Later, you carry a basket of finished loaves to the pantry. The steward counts each one, marking them off with little scratches on a wax board. Some go to the Lord's table, others to the workers. A few are tucked aside for guests. You sneak a small crust. It's still warm. Bliss. By afternoon, the oven is cooling, and the rush slows. The apprentice baker begins cleaning soot off the ceiling with a wet rag and a stick. You offer to help. He grins and hands you the rag. "You'll regret this," he says, and wow, he was right. Every drop of black goo lands directly on your shirt. Around this time, the castle reeve stops by to inspect the bread. He slices one loaf, sniffs it, eats a piece, and grunts. Better than last week. Then he leaves. You feel like you've passed a test you didn't know you were taking. Later, you sit with the other workers, tearing into a cooled loaf and dipping chunks into onion stew. It's coarse bread, dense, slightly sour, but after a day of sweating over ovens, it tastes like celebration. No one speaks much, just chewing, a few chuckles, and the occasional sigh of relief. A boy from the stables appears, begging for a loaf to bribe his favorite mare. The baker tosses him a misshapen lump. "Tell her it's artisan style." You laugh, even as you realize your arms are still vibrating from the kneading. There's a kind of reverence here, weirdly enough. Bread holds the castle together more than walls do. Everyone depends on it. Lords, peasants, knights, squires. The flour is stored like treasure. The yeast is whispered about like it's magic. Even the fire is fed carefully like it has moods. When you finally leave, your tunic smells like smoke and yeast. Your hands are raw, but you've learned something sacred. Baking in a castle isn't just cooking. It's survival. It's politics. It's rhythm and ritual and reputation. And as you curl up for sleep, a crust of bread still in your pocket, you dream not of swords or dragons or heroic deeds, but of warm ovens, quiet work, and a world where feeding people is the truest form of power. The castle's forge smells of smoke and sweat, but the air is thick with something else today, sparks and purpose. You step into a world where iron bends to will and fire hums with ancient secrets. Welcome to the blacksmith's domain, a place where the clang of hammer on anvil isn't just noise, it's life itself. Your hands are greasy before you even touch the first tool. The smith's apprentice offers a sooty glove. "Hold this," he says, handing you a red-hot horseshoe with the confident grin of someone who knows you'll probably drop it. You clutch it like a baby dragon, trying not to burn off your fingers. The blacksmith's workshop is a jumble of glowing coals, sharp tools, and half-finished weapons. It smells like burnt wood, metal filings, and a hint of something sulphurous. Probably the magical fumes of the forge. You wonder briefly if the forge master is part wizard, then remember, it's just really hot and smoky. Here's your straight-up historical fact. The castle's blacksmith wasn't just a maker of swords and horseshoes. He was the fixer, the mender, the emergency mechanic. Broken hinge, blacksmith. Rusted arrowhead, blacksmith. That one unlucky servant who keeps dropping pans. You guessed it. You're handed a hammer and told to practice drawing out the iron, basically shaping a lump of red-hot metal by hitting it just right. Sounds simple, right? Nope. The iron is stubborn. You hit, it resists. You miss, it clangs. You swear you're making a terrible noise, but the smith just nods thoughtfully. Fringe tidbit time. Some medieval blacksmiths reportedly carried lucky charms, bits of bone, carved stones, or even small animal teeth to protect themselves from fire and accidents. Your lucky charm? A coffee stain on your sleeve? The forge master grumbles, "Strength comes with patience, not fury." You grunt in response and try not to imagine yourself as a tiny dragon breathing fire and smashing anvils. After a few attempts, your iron starts to take shape. Not bad for a first-timer. Nearby, horses whinny impatiently. The farrier, a smith specialized in horseshoes, is clipping and shaping metal for hooves. It's a careful balance. Too tight, and the horse limps. Too loose, and the shoe falls off. The horses are surprisingly patient as they wait their turn, but you catch a slight eye roll from a particularly grumpy mare named Bess. You're next assigned to help temper a blade. This involves heating the sword until it glows, then plunging it into water to harden the steel. You watch, fascinated, as the glowing blade sizzles when dipped. The smith explains this makes the steel tough but not brittle. Exactly what you want for a weapon that might save your life someday. Historians still argue whether medieval swords were truly as deadly as legends claim, or if their effectiveness has been exaggerated over time. For now, you decide it's best to respect them anyway. While the forge is all about heat and muscle, there's an unexpected art to it. The smith hums a low tune as he works, and sparks fly like fireworks. You realize the forge is both a workplace and a sanctuary where raw power meets quiet skill. At midday, you help fix a broken hinge on a heavy wooden door. The smith explains how every piece matters. One small failure could be a castle's undoing. You tighten bolts, file down rough edges, and feel oddly proud that your sweaty hands are part of something bigger. You overhear talk of a new batch of arrowheads needed for an upcoming skirmish. "Better make 'em sharp," the smith mutters, "and quick." You nod solemnly, suddenly aware that the weapons you're helping create will almost certainly be used to hurt someone. It's a sobering thought. The apprentice challenges you to a hammering contest. You accept, of course. The result, a loud mess, some bent metal, and a lot of laughter. The smith chuckles, "You've got heart." That's half the battle. By afternoon, your arms feel like they might fall off, but you're riding a strange high, the satisfaction of creating something solid, useful, dangerous. The forge starts to cool. You step outside, blinking in the sunlight, feeling like you just emerged from a dragon's belly. Your shirt smells like smoke and determination. You have bruises you didn't know you could get from holding a hammer. As you wander back toward the castle's center, you realize something important. Every clang, every hammer strike, every sweat-soaked hour here is a pulse in the castle's heart. Without the forge, the castle wouldn't stand. Not against enemies, not against time. And though you don't know it yet, this fire will call you back again and again, whispering its promise of strength and survival. Today, your hands are slick with suds, and your feet shuffle along uneven stone floors slick with water and, well, everything. Welcome to the castle's latrine, or as the castle folk might quietly call it, the garderobe. It's not glamorous, but it's the chamber everyone depends on in ways that make you want to blush and giggle simultaneously. You trudge down narrow corridors toward the garderobe tower, clutching a bucket, already regretting every decision that led to this moment. The smell hits you first. A pungent, unmistakable mix of human biology, damp stone, and centuries-old wood. You probably won't survive this without gagging at least once. The garderobe is more than just a toilet. It's a medieval sanitation system. Usually, it's a small room jutting out from the castle wall with a hole that drops down into the moat, a cesspit, or simply into the dirt below. When the wind's right, the smell wafts in to greet you like an unwelcome ghost. Here's a solid historical fact. Some castles had garderobes designed with ventilation shafts to carry away the worst odors, while others just hoped the wind would do the trick. And yet, despite their flaws, these early bathrooms were considered a massive improvement over communal cesspits. You quickly learn the unspoken rules of the garderobe. Never linger too long. Always bring your own bucket or chamber pot if you want to avoid the plunge below. And for the love of all that is holy, don't drop your belongings. Yes, people have. Fun fringe fact. There are rumors that some lords used to throw their business right out the window during feasts accidentally or intentionally targeting unlucky peasants below. Historians still argue whether this was cruel or just part of the medieval charm. As you stand there trying to balance hygiene, modesty, and your gag reflex, you notice the wooden seat's surprisingly smooth, worn surface. It's as if hundreds of other unlucky souls left their marks, both physical and spiritual. Later, you help carry full buckets down to the moat side, where the castle's night soil men dump the contents far enough away to keep the drinking water cleanish. This is dirty, smelly, and thankless work, but vital to keep the plague from knocking on the castle gates. You notice that the latrine tower is oddly popular with rats. They dart in and out of holes, shamelessly scavenging. The castle's cats, meanwhile, seem to have a feast of their own, stalking the shadows with lethal focus. After your shift, you wash your hands with cold water from a wooden basin. No soap, just brisk scrubbing and hope. You overhear a conversation between two servants discussing how some nobles prefer to use perfumed cloths to mask the stink of the garderobe. Fancy, one sneers, but I'd rather have clean air than perfume any day. The castle's hygiene may be rudimentary, but it's a constant battle against nature's nastier side. Every decision, where to place the garderobe, how often to empty it, how to keep the rats in check, affects everyone's health. As you leave, you catch a glimpse of a young noblewoman walking past. Her nose crinkled, but her expression carefully neutral. You wonder how often she thinks about what's hidden beneath those polished floors and tapestries. Historians still argue how much medieval sanitation truly affected disease spread, with some suggesting it was a minor help and others crediting it with preventing countless outbreaks. You're grateful for modern plumbing, but also oddly impressed by the castle's gritty, grimy defenses against nature's most persistent intruder. That night, as you wash your face and try to forget the garderobe's aroma, you realize you've been touched by one of the castle's less glamorous but absolutely necessary truths. You wake to the smell of wood smoke and damp earth, a gentle reminder that the castle's gardens are alive long before the bells toll for morning prayer. Today, you're assigned to the grounds, a world of dirt, roots, and secret life that sustains everyone from the Lord's table to the humblest servant's stew pot. The castle garden isn't just flowers and pretty herbs. It's a bustling pharmacy, grocery store, and alchemy lab rolled into one patch of soil. You find yourself kneeling by beds of thyme, lavender, and rosemary, their scents mingling in the cool air, calming and sharp all at once. Your job starts with weeding, a surprisingly epic battle against stubborn weeds that cling to roots like they own the place. You're reminded that gardens in medieval times were considered a divine gift, but also a battlefield against pests and drought. Here's a historical fact to chew on. Most castle gardens were enclosed by walls or hedges to protect the precious plants from deer, rabbits, and the occasional overzealous peasant. The walls kept more than plants safe. They helped maintain order in the chaotic medieval world. You prune rose bushes, whose petals aren't just for decoration, they're crushed into ointments or brewed into teas said to soothe headaches and stir courage. The gardeners know the power hidden in each leaf and petal, a knowledge passed down through generations. A quirky tidbit. Some castles had gardens designed in elaborate labyrinth patterns meant to both entertain and confuse. Historians still argue whether these were purely decorative or served as early escape routes for nobles in case of siege. You decide you'd get hopelessly lost either way. As you harvest herbs, you spot a bee buzzing lazily. Bees were more than just buzzing annoyances. They were essential for pollination and honey, which doubled as sweetener and medicine. The castle beekeeper is a quiet, mysterious figure, often surrounded by a cloud of buzzing attendants and whispered rumors. You pull up a handful of dandelions, surprisingly edible and often underestimated. These weeds can be boiled, stewed, or mixed into salads. Survival here means knowing that nature's freebies are sometimes the tastiest treats. The garden also serves as a source of dye plants, like woad for blue and madder for red. Clothes you wear, even if threadbare, owe their colors to these humble plants. The process is long and messy, but every shirt and cloak carries the garden's fingerprint. Midday, you join the gardener for a lesson on crop rotation and soil health. It's not just about planting and hoping, rotating crops, peas one year, grains the next, helps keep the soil fertile. It's a medieval version of don't put all your eggs in one basket, except with dirt. You notice the gardener is carrying a small leather pouch. Inside, you later discover, are seeds traded with neighboring castles, spreading rare herbs and plants across the region. This exchange connects castles in a green web of survival and cooperation. Some nobles fancy themselves botanists, collecting rare and exotic plants from faraway lands. It's the medieval version of, look what I found on my vacation. Only sometimes those plants were poisonous. Historians still debate whether such exotic gardening was mostly show or practical. As the sun dips, you help harvest roots and greens to be stored for winter. The cold months are long and cruel, but the garden's bounty offers a lifeline. You feel a quiet pride knowing that these simple plants sustain not just bellies, but spirits. Walking back to the castle, your hands dirt-streaked and fragrant with herbs, you realize that life in the garden is a slow dance with nature, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, always essential. The garden might not have the glamour of the throne room or the clang of the forge, but here, amidst the soil and sunlight, the castle's pulse beats steady and strong. You trudge through the castle's damp stone corridors, the echo of your footsteps bouncing off walls thick with centuries of secrets. Today, you're on kitchen duty, specifically the castle's larder and food storage. It's a job that demands patience, a nose for spoilage, and the occasional survival instinct for dodging the occasional rat or two. The larder is a cavernous, cool room packed with barrels of salted meat, baskets of root vegetables, and rows of hanging herbs drying slowly like natural incense. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, earth, and something faintly sour, a reminder that preservation is a delicate balance. You soon realize that medieval castles had to be tiny fortresses of self-sufficiency. Without refrigeration, the larder was the kingdom's freezer and pantry combined, a place where clever preservation methods kept food from turning into a science experiment. Here's your historical nugget. Salt was the medieval magic ingredient. Salted pork or beef could last months, even through a siege. Fish was sometimes smoked or pickled, barrels of honey kept sweets edible, and grains stored in tightly woven sacks could survive winters. Without these techniques, the castle might starve long before invaders arrived. You inspect a barrel of salted herring, noting the briny smell and oily sheen. Not gourmet, but effective, the steward tells you. You chuckle, thinking about how much you'd complain if this was your diet. Then again, you'd probably be dead without it. A quirky tidbit floats your way. Some castles reportedly kept bees inside the larder to pollinate the herbs hanging above. Practical and a bit weird. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or an isolated eccentricity. You're tasked with sorting grains, moving sacks of barley and oats to make room for a fresh shipment. As you lift the heavy bags, you notice tiny holes, the work of grain weevils, the castle's uninvited pantry pests. The steward sighs. Fight 'em off as best we can. They're relentless. You help bundle dried herbs, thyme, sage, and mint, tying them in neat bunches to keep the aroma and flavor locked in. These herbs are used not just in cooking, but also in remedies and even in cleansing rituals. You pinch a sprig and inhale, savoring the sharp, earthy scent. Later, the cook stops by, picking herbs with a surgeon's precision. No castle feast without rosemary and garlic, she says with a wink. You wonder if she knows how many times those same herbs kept the castle's occupants from getting seriously ill. Preserving food was more art than science. You learn about root cellars dug deep neath the castle, keeping vegetables like turnips and carrots safe from frost. You imagine the eerie chill down there, where darkness and cold create the perfect conditions for long-term storage. Suddenly, you hear a loud thud. One of the barrels toppled, and a rat darts away with a stolen piece of bread. You swear the rodent smirks at you before disappearing into a crack in the wall. The steward hands you a knife and asks you to carve a slab of hardened cheese for dinner. The cheese is crumbly and sharp, nothing like the smooth stuff you know. You nibble a piece. It's strong, biting, and strangely satisfying. Historians still argue about how much variety medieval diets really had, with some saying castles offered surprisingly diverse food and others insisting it was mostly bland staples. Your stomach agrees with the latter, but you remain hopeful. As evening falls, you help stack the day's harvest in the larder, the room now a mosaic of colors, smells, and textures, a treasure trove of survival. You wipe your hands on your tunic, exhausted but quietly proud. The larder might be out of sight, but without it, the castle wouldn't last long. And as you head toward the warmth of the great hall, you realize that in this place, food isn't just fuel. It's history, survival, and sometimes a very smelly adventure. The sound of boots clattering on stone echoes through the corridors as you are ushered toward the castle's armory. Here, amid racks of gleaming weapons and clinking armor, the pulse of medieval defense beats loud and clear. You're about to dive into the world of swords, shields, and chain mail, where every piece tells a story of battle, bravery, and sometimes bad fashion choices. You run your fingers over a rack of swords, their edges dull, but their weight telling you these were made for serious work. The armory is a cold, cavernous room with iron hooks, wooden racks, and shelves filled with helmets that look like they belong in a dragon's lair rather than a noble's collection. A historical fact to chew on. Chainmail, that interlocking web of metal rings, was the armor of choice for many knights and soldiers. It was flexible yet strong, designed to stop slashes and slow down arrows. But it weighed a good 20 to 30 pounds, about the same as a modern backpack packed for a weekend hike. Not exactly light. You try on a helmet, surprisingly heavy and claustrophobic. The narrow eye slits make you feel like you're peeking through a soda straw. You laugh, thinking how medieval knights had to balance protection with actually being able to see the enemy. Quirky tidbit. Some armor included secret compartments or hidden messages etched into the metal, kind of like medieval Easter eggs. Historians still argue how widespread these were or if they're just romanticized myths. Nearby, a blacksmith is repairing a dented breastplate. Sparks fly as he hammers out imperfections, the clang ringing through the room. You learn that armor wasn't just worn. It was regularly maintained, oiled, and adjusted to fit the wearer's body perfectly. A poorly fitted helmet could be a death trap. You examine a longbow, its wood smooth and strung tight. The longbow was a game changer in medieval warfare, famous for its range and power. English archers armed with these could shoot arrows piercing through armor, shifting the balance in battles like Agincourt. You feel a thrill imagining the tension before the release of a volley. The armory's walls are decorated with shields bearing heraldic symbols, lions, crosses, and dragons, each telling stories of family pride and battlefield glory. You wonder if the owners took their fashion cues as seriously as their fighting skills. A soldier jokes about the curse of the squeaky armor, a strange and funny phenomenon where some suits would creak loudly during battle, potentially giving away a knight's position. You try to imagine a knight sneaking through the bushes, only to announce himself with a squeak. You're handed a sword, surprisingly blunt at the tip, and taught how to hold it properly. The trainer emphasizes balance and technique over brute force. This isn't a sword fight in the movies, where swinging wildly wins the day. You get a brief glimpse of a crossbow, more compact, but slower to reload. Crossbows were controversial. Some church leaders banned them against fellow Christians because they could kill from a distance with less chance of personal valor. Historians still argue about the ethical impact of this medieval sniper rifle. You practice a few slow swings, feeling the weight and imagining the pressure knights faced, balancing life, honor, and survival. The armory is less about glamour and more about gritty preparation for the chaos outside the castle walls. As you leave, the metallic scent lingers on your skin, a reminder that behind the glinting weapons and shining armor lies a harsh reality of conflict and constant readiness. The armory might be a cold, heavy place, but it's a vital heartbeat in the castle's defense. Without it, legends wouldn't be forged, and the walls you call home might crumble. You step into the great hall as twilight softens the sky outside, and immediately the scent of burning wood and roasting meat wraps around you like a warm, slightly smoky blanket. The great hall isn't just the castle's dining room. It's the heart where life pulses with chatter, clinking goblets, and the scrape of plates. Tonight, you join the throng of servants, squires, and nobles gathered around long wooden tables, all buzzing about the day's news and gossip. You navigate between benches, balancing platters of steaming pies and flagons of ale, trying not to trip on the heavy woolen cloaks draped over the benches. Here's a solid fact. The great hall was the social nucleus, where meals, courts, and festivals took place. The tables were long, often seating dozens, and food was served in courses that ranged from simple breads to extravagant roasted boar. Everyone ate together, but seating reflected rank, a subtle but constant reminder of the social ladder. You overhear a noble complaining about the coarseness of the bread. You smirk, knowing that most peasants would be thrilled to have even that much. The loaf is dense, chewy, and full of grain bits, a far cry from today's fluffy supermarket bread. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you serve a bowl of pottage, a thick stew of vegetables and meat. Sometimes, cooks added crushed snail shells for texture, or even used crocodile dung as a kind of sunscreen ingredient. Okay, that's from earlier, but it pops into your mind with a laugh. Historians still argue how much flavor medieval cooks actually aimed for versus just making food that lasted. The great hall's fireplace blazes high, and you notice tapestries hanging on the stone walls depicting legendary battles and family crests. These weren't just decoration. They helped insulate the cold walls and told stories to anyone who cared to listen. You see a minstrel tuning his lute, preparing for the evening's entertainment. Music, dancing, and storytelling were vital escapes from the hard realities of castle life. Sometimes, even the grimmest nobles would relax to a bawdy ballad or a clever tale. Dinner progresses with a mix of awkward silences and bursts of laughter. The lord of the castle raises a goblet, making a toast to health and prosperity. The room echoes with the clinking of cups and murmurs of assent. You notice the variety on the table: roasted fowl, thick slices of cheese, fresh fruit brought in from the gardens. Feasting was a rare luxury. The rest of the year meant simpler fare. You wonder how many of these dishes had secret ingredients like herbs from the garden or spices traded from distant lands. Between courses, You overhear a debate among scholars and knights about the proper way to carve a joint of meat without offending the host. Table manners were a serious matter, shaping alliances and reputations. As the meal winds down, servants begin clearing plates, and the minstrel starts playing a lively tune. You feel the tension of the day dissolve in the warmth and camaraderie of the hall, a sharp contrast to the cold stone and hard labor outside. You slip away to the kitchen entrance where the cooks are already prepping for tomorrow. Their tired smiles and quick jokes remind you that behind every feast is a team of unsung heroes who never get to sit down. The great hall is more than a room. It's a living story of the castle's people, their joys, struggles, and moments of shared humanity. And as you head back to your quarters, the distant laughter and music linger like a comforting lullaby. You rise early, the chill of dawn creeping under your threadbare cloak as you make your way to the castle's chapel. It's a small, quiet sanctuary tucked within the thick walls, a place where stone arches and flickering candlelight create a fragile bubble of peace amidst the castle's constant hustle. The chapel's stone walls absorb the soft murmur of monks chanting Latin hymns. You sit on a cold wooden bench, the worn wood creaking beneath you, and watch as the morning light spills through stained glass windows, painting colorful patterns on the flagstone floor. Religion here isn't just a spiritual refuge. It's woven into every part of life. The Lord's rule is seen as divinely sanctioned, and the chapel's presence underscores the castle's claim to legitimacy and order. Prayer punctuates the day, grounding everyone from nobles to servants in a shared rhythm. You overhear the chaplain speaking to a group of children about saints and miracles, his voice gentle but firm. It's clear that faith is both a comfort and a tool, shaping beliefs and behaviors alike. Historical fact, the church held immense power during the medieval period, influencing politics, education, and even medicine. Many castles had chapels with resident clergy who not only performed religious rites but also advised the Lord and recorded important events. You spot a tiny relic case said to hold a fragment of a saint's bone or cloth, objects of deep reverence and sometimes political clout. Pilgrims might visit castles specifically to glimpse such holy artifacts, hoping for blessings or miracles. A quirky detail catches your eye. Some chapels had carved misericords, small wooden seats with hidden hinged parts that allowed weary monks to lean while appearing to sit upright during long services. Historians still argue how common these comfort aids really were and how much they helped keep medieval sermons bearable. You watch the chaplain sprinkle holy water over the altar, a ritual meant to purify and protect. The scent of incense curls through the air, mingling with the cold stone and old wood, a strange but soothing perfume. During the services, nobles wear their finest garments, blending piety with subtle displays of wealth. You notice a knight absent-mindedly adjusting his chainmail under his surcoat, a reminder that even here, the tension between spirituality and war never fully disappears. You think about how faith shapes courage in battle, offers solace in loss, and justifies the castle's hierarchy. It's a complex web where devotion meets politics and personal belief. After the service, you join the chapel's sacristan in preparing for the next ritual, arranging candles, cleaning chalices, and replenishing the holy oil. It's humble work, but deeply respected. Walking back through the quiet halls, you carry a sense of calm, a brief respite before the castle's daily grind resumes. The chapel may be small, but its presence looms large in the lives of everyone here. Historians still debate how deeply religion penetrated the daily lives of common folk versus the nobility, but its impact is undeniable. And as you settle in for the day ahead, you realize that in this fortress of stone and steel, faith is one of the strongest pillars holding everything together. You trudge toward the castle stables, the smell of hay and horse sweat hitting you like a warm, earthy wave. The sounds of whinnies and the steady clatter of hooves set a lively backdrop as you enter the bustling world of medieval equine care, a place far less glamorous than jousts and tournaments might suggest. The stable master greets you with a nod, handing you a pitchfork and a bucket. Your job is straightforward. Muck out the stalls, feed the horses, and keep the mess from overwhelming the space. It's dirty work, but essential. The castle's horses are lifelines for travel, battle, and status. Here's a fact. Medieval horses were smaller than modern breeds, averaging about 14 hands high, closer to ponies in size, but bred for strength and endurance. They were trained not just to carry knights into battle, but also to haul heavy loads and patrol the castle grounds. You brush a powerful bay horse named Rowan, feeling the heat radiate through his coat and the steady rhythm of his breath. Horses were prized possessions, symbols of wealth and power, but they also required constant care and knowledge. A quirky detail surfaces. Some medieval horses were believed to be susceptible to evil spirits or bad luck, leading to rituals and charms being performed to protect them. Historians still debate how widespread these superstitions were and if they influenced actual horse management. You help the stable master prepare feed, mostly oats and barley mixed with hay. Feeding was timed carefully to keep the horses healthy without making them too energetic or sluggish. You wonder if the horses understood the importance of their meals or just enjoyed the taste. Cleaning the stalls is a workout, with shovels full of manure and straw to toss into piles destined for the castle's gardens or fields as fertilizer. It's a grim reminder that every part of castle life is connected in a messy but vital cycle. You hear stories from the stable hands about famous horses owned by the Lord, swift chargers that carried knights to victory, and stubborn nags that refused to move unless bribed with apples. You watch as a farrier arrives to shoe the horses. The clanging of hammer on iron fills the air as the expert fits horseshoes designed to protect the hooves from rough terrain. Shoeing was an art and a science, critical for the horse's survival during long campaigns. Historians still argue about how often horses were replaced or rested during battles, with some suggesting knights switched mounts mid-fight to keep fresh steeds ready. You imagine the chaos of such moments, a dance of men and beasts under fire. You spot a few strays picking at spilled grain and wonder how many of the castle's problems start or end in the stable. It's a messy place, full of life, sweat, and constant motion, a far cry from the shining armor and polished halls often romanticized in stories. As you finish your chores, the sun sinks lower, casting long shadows through the stable doors. You pat Rowan one last time, feeling the bond between horse and human, one forged through daily care, trust, and the unspoken understanding that both rely on each other for survival. The stable is a kingdom within the castle, ruled by hay and hard work rather than titles. And as you walk back through the gates, your boots sticky with mud, You realize that without these unsung heroes and their hooves, the castle story wouldn't gallop forward. You wander toward the castle's garden, a surprisingly vibrant splash of green amid the gray stone and dust. The garden is a patchwork of herbs, vegetables, and flowers, an oasis of life where nature and necessity entwine. You can almost forget the harshness of castle life here, except for the ever-present buzz of insects and the dirt under your fingernails. Gardens were crucial, not just for beauty, but survival. You kneel among rows of parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, the so-called four thieves, believed to ward off plague and evil spirits. You pick a sprig and crush it, inhaling the sharp herbal aroma, a reminder that in this place, scent is as much medicine as it is seasoning. Here's a historical fact. Medieval gardens often included physic gardens, dedicated to growing medicinal plants used to treat ailments. Healing herbs like lavender, chamomile, and comfrey were staples. Gardeners needed both knowledge and a bit of luck to keep these plants thriving. You notice a curious wooden contraption, a simple drip irrigation system using clay pipes to channel water. A tiny marvel of medieval ingenuity designed to keep thirsty plants alive through dry spells. Quirky tidbit. Some gardens were planted according to astrological charts, with gardeners believing that planting under certain moon phases would improve growth. Historians still debate how seriously these lunar planting calendars were followed versus being charming folklore. As you move through the garden, you spot rows of vegetables, turnips, carrots, onions, and cabbages, growing in neat regimented rows. Root vegetables were favorites, sturdy and storable through the winter months. You pull a small carrot from the soil, tasting its faint sweetness, a tiny luxury compared to the often bland fare in the great hall. Nearby, bees buzz industriously among flowers, essential pollinators that medieval gardeners relied on, though they didn't fully understand the science. You overhear a gardener explaining how they rotate crops to prevent soil exhaustion, a practice surprisingly advanced for the time. They also use compost piles made from kitchen scraps and stable waste, a cycle of renewal that sustains the garden and, by extension, the castle. You find a small patch dedicated to flowers used for dyeing fabrics, marigolds for yellow, madder roots for red, and woad for blue. Color wasn't just decoration, it signified wealth and status, and dyeing was a skilled craft. The gardener shares tales of how some herbs were considered magical, capable of warding off evil or bringing good luck. You smile, thinking about all the charms and rituals whispered in shadowed corners of the castle. Historians still argue about how widespread garden cultivation was in castles compared to peasant villages, but what's clear is that these green patches were lifelines, sources of health and hope. As the sun dips lower, you sit on a stone bench, watching the golden light soften the garden's edges. The scent of earth and herbs wraps around you, a quiet reminder that even in a fortress built for war, life blooms in green defiance. You stand, brushing dirt from your hands, feeling a small connection to the gardeners whose work quietly fed the castle and kept its inhabitants alive. The garden might be humble, but it's a vital thread in the castle's living tapestry, a place where care and patience grow alongside resilience. You make your way to the castle's blacksmith forge, a fiery heart of heat and hammering that beats relentlessly throughout the day. The air here is thick with smoke, soot, and the sharp scent of molten metal, a gritty symphony of industry that keeps the castle's wheels turning. The blacksmith's arms gleam with sweat as he strikes glowing iron on the anvil, sparks flying like tiny stars. You lean in, mesmerized by the rhythmic clang and the transformation of raw ore into tools, weapons, and armor. A solid historical fact. Blacksmiths were essential craftsmen in medieval castles, creating everything from horseshoes and nails to the finely crafted swords of knights. Their skills were a blend of art and science, learned through years of apprenticeship. You watched the smith quench a red-hot blade in water, steam hissing as the metal cools and hardens. This process, called tempering, is what gives weapons their resilience. Too brittle and they'd snap, too soft and they'd bend uselessly. Quirky tidbit. Some blacksmiths believed they had to perform certain rituals or prayers before forging to ensure the blade would be strong and true. Historians still argue how much of this was superstition versus actual practiced belief. The forge's walls are lined with tools, hammers, tongs, chisels, and you spot a collection of horseshoes, some plain, some ornate. Horseshoes weren't just practical. They were often decorated to reflect status or even serve as lucky charms. You handle a half-finished sword, noting the rough texture of the steel and the faint glow of residual heat. The smith explains how each blade is unique, with slight imperfections that only a trained eye can detect. Nearby, an apprentice sharpens a knife, the whetstone dust coating his hands. You remember hearing that blacksmiths often served as farriers and armorers, all rolled into one hard-working trade. You ask about armor repairs, and the smith tells you how dents from battle are hammered out. Sometimes reinforced with new plates, armor was expensive, and knights often passed their suits down generations, making repairs a constant necessity. The forge is a stark contrast to the polished halls and velvet tapestries. It's a place of raw power and endless labor. You feel the heat on your face and the vibration of each strike reverberate through your bones. You notice a small shrine in the corner of the forge, a nod to St. Dunstan, the patron saint of blacksmiths, whose image watches over the craft and the craftsman. This blend of faith and fire is a medieval trademark. Historians still debate the level of technological advancement in medieval metallurgy, with some arguing that the period smiths were far more innovative than commonly thought. As the day winds down, the smith wipes his brow and hands you a freshly forged horseshoe, a small token of the forge's enduring spirit. You pocket it, a tangible piece of the castle's beating heart. Leaving the forge, you carry with you the smell of smoke and iron, a reminder that behind every shining sword and sturdy nail is the relentless hammering of those who make the castle stand strong. You move toward the castle's dungeon, a place where shadows cling to the cold stone like second skin, and the air feels heavier with each step. It's not a place anyone visits by choice, but it's as much a part of castle life as feasts or festivals, a grim reminder of the law and order that keep the fortress running. The dungeon is damp and dark, lit only by flickering torches that cast long, jittery shadows. Chains hang from the walls, and heavy iron doors groan on their hinges. You feel the chill seep into your bones as you walk past narrow cells, each telling silent stories of desperation and regret. Here's a historical fact. Medieval castles often had dungeons or keeps used to hold prisoners ranging from petty thieves to political enemies. Conditions were brutal. Poor ventilation, little food, and cramped spaces made survival difficult. Yet not all castles had dungeons. Some used nearby town prisons instead. You overhear guards discussing a recent prisoner, a knight accused of treason, now confined below. His fate is uncertain, caught between justice and mercy. Historians still argue about how frequently dungeons were used for long-term imprisonment versus temporary holding. A quirky tidbit: some castles featured oubliettes, secret dungeon pits where prisoners were literally forgotten, left to survive or not, without contact. The term comes from the French oublier, meaning to forget. Whether such horrors were common or exaggerated remains debated. The dank smell of mold and rust fills your nostrils, mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood from old wounds. You try not to imagine what it would feel like to be trapped here, isolated from the light and the life above. Chains and shackles vary in size, some designed for humans, others to restrain unruly animals or even prisoners' limbs. Torture devices are whispered about, but rarely seen, fueling dark rumors more than everyday reality. You glimpse a small window high above, barred and smeared with grime. It lets in a sliver of moonlight, a fragile connection to the outside world that most prisoners never reach. Despite the darkness, some dungeons were surprisingly organized, with wardens keeping records and sometimes allowing minimal comforts. Religion played a role here too, with chaplains visiting to offer last rites or counsel, blurring the lines between justice and mercy. The dungeon reminds you how fragile the line is between order and chaos. One wrong step, one betrayal, and you could find yourself down here, forgotten by time. You shudder and hurry back to the main hall, the flickering torches casting shadows that seem to watch you retreat. Historians still debate the accuracy of medieval prison conditions, with some suggesting later accounts exaggerated the horror to serve political or moral agendas. As you leave, you realize the dungeon is the castle's darkest secret, an unseen underworld that balances power with fear. And like the whispers of the wind through the battlements, its presence lingers long after you step into the light. The evening settles like a heavy blanket over the castle, softening the harsh edges of stone and wood. You find yourself back in the great hall, where the flicker of torches and the warm glow of a roaring fire chase away the chill creeping through the corridors. This is the castle's heartbeat, the place where lives intersect and stories unfold. Long tables groan under the weight of humble feasts, stews simmering in iron pots, chunks of coarse bread, and the occasional roasted fowl. The scents mingle: herbs from the garden, smoky hearth, and the ever-present tang of mead. You sit among the throng, feeling the buzz of conversation rise and fall like waves. Here's a historical fact. Great halls were multifunctional spaces used for dining, meetings, entertainment, and even courts of law. They were designed to impress but also to serve practical needs for the lord and his retinue. Laughter bubbles up as minstrels pluck at lutes and recite tales of knights, dragons, and distant lands. It's an escape, a shared culture that knits the community together after a day of toil. You catch yourself humming along, the melodies a surprising comfort. A quirky detail catches your eye. Some castles had a garderobe, a small wooden box with a hole built into the walls, essentially an early toilet. The waste dropped into the moat or a pit below. Hardly luxurious, but better than the alternative of chamber pots in crowded rooms. Historians still argue about how much privacy medieval people actually had. You notice children darting between tables, their eyes wide with excitement, snatching bits of food. Their laughter cuts through the grown-up chatter, a reminder of life's simple joys amidst the fortress's weighty demands. The Lord raises his goblet for a toast, his voice booming, reminding everyone of loyalty and honor. You watch faces light with approval or masked fear. It's a dance of power played out over mugs of ale and breadcrumbs. You think back to the day's journey, the chapel's quiet prayers, the stable's dirt and sweat, the garden's green life, the forge's fiery pulse, and the dungeon's cold shadow. Each part of the castle feels alive, a cog in a vast machine of survival and hierarchy. Historians still debate how typical castle life really was, whether it was harsh and brutal or more varied and nuanced. But you've seen enough to know it was both. As the night deepens, you lean back, the firelight flickering across faces old and young, noble and servant alike. Despite the grit and grind, there's a strange warmth here, a collective endurance, a shared humanity. You close your eyes briefly, the sounds and smells swirling into a lullaby of the past. This castle, with all its flaws and wonders, feels a little less foreign, a little more like home.